Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played and I rank them in order of preference. Now before I get started on these 5 very interesting games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Flip 7. So this is a brand new push your luck card game, and to be honest, this is probably one of the most predictable push your luck games that I've ever played, but I don't actually mean that in a negative way because I tend to like those styles of games anyway. So this one, you are trying to race to get to 200 points, and the first player to do that will be the winner, and you're going to do that through a simple kind of a banking system or a hitting system. So again, you either hit me or you bank the points you've already got. Being wary of, if you ever reveal the same numbered card, you are going to go bust and basically waste your turn. Now this deck consists of a bunch of number cards as well as some special cards. And the way that the numbers are spread is quite interesting because there are 12 12s, there are 10 10s, 9 9s and so on. So the more valuable cards, because the numbers of the cards are your points, are the more dangerous ones because they're more likely to appear again, which I think is quite a nice little balancing touch of the game. The special cards will do things such as forcing your opponent to flip 3 cards, forcing an opponent to bank their cards, doing things such as getting yourself a get out of jail free card. So if you ever reveal a double, you can get rid of this special card rather than going bust, and so on. So all very kind of mass appeal, mass market feeling mechanisms here, but it works for what it is. Sometimes it's quite difficult to make up the ground if you're falling too far behind. You know, if someone's way ahead, they're probably going to win the game, but the game's fast enough and you can sometimes bank a ton of points in a single turn. I like this additional incentive where if you ever get to 7 cards with no duplicates, then you will be forced to bank and everybody will end their turn, but you'll also get a bonus 15 points for doing so. So sometimes it's definitely valuable to keep on pushing rather than just playing it safe each time. So after explaining this, you're probably going to be aware what this game is. It is what it says on the tin. I like it for what it is. I think it's very good. My only issue is that it does have some stiff competition, and I have very similar games in my collection already. Particularly, I do have Circus Flocati. I think Circus Flocati is a bit stronger and has a few more nuanced and clever twists on the game than this one does. But if I'm playing with complete novices of board games, this is a really great example of a card game that's still going to give you that visceral tension of a push your luck game, but still be extremely easy to understand for anybody, whether you play games regularly or not. So that is Flip 7 at number 5. At number 4, I have Cabanga. This is a tiny box card game where you are trying to shed your cards quicker than your opponent, because at the end of the round, if you have any cards left in your hand, then they are going to be worth negative points. Whoever gets to 18 negative points will trigger the end of the game, and at that point, whoever has the fewest negative points will be the winner. Now, the game system is super simple, where you have 4 different kind of rows of cards, each associated to a different colour, and on your turn, you are going to play one of these numbered cards on that matching coloured row, and these rows have 2 cards on them, so you've got 2 different numbers, and what you're trying to do is that you're trying to shed these cards, but your opponent has the opportunity to piggyback off your turn based on the gap in the number between those cards. So for example, if the red row had a 1 card out there and an 8 card out there, and then you play maybe a 5 on top of the 1, then you've got a 5 and an 8 face up, then anybody who has a 6 or a 7, as in the numbers between that 5 and 8, can discard those cards from their hand as a kind of bonus action. And if they do that, then the active player will have to draw more cards into the hand, which of course is a bad thing because they're more likely to have those cards at the end of the round, which will mean more negative points. That is all the game consists of. You're going to try and keep those gaps as small as possible to stop people piggybacking. You've got to be a little bit vigilant and a bit more alert so that if a player does play a card, you need to make sure that you smash those cards down quickly and shed them before it moves on to the next player to not miss out on that opportunity to get rid of more cards. I've probably made this game sound a bit more complicated than it actually is. This is as simple as it gets. It's probably like 1 out of 5 in terms of complexity. But I do like it. I like the flow. It really is a turn your brain off and kind of roll with the punches style of game. But you can make a few informed decisions based on what other players are doing and based on other cards people have shared and things. But generally speaking, you can keep those gaps in the cards quite narrow for the most part. And there maybe isn't as much piggybacking as I would have liked, but maybe that's just in the few games that I've played of this one. But you know, sometimes you are forced to make those big spreads, which means that people are going to throw loads of cards at you, and you're going to be forced to pick loads more up. But still, again, you've got to roll with the punches, but it's very enjoyable, very small box, and again, very pleasant. So that is Cabanga at number 4. At number 3, I have a 2-player only card game with confusing lands. Now, this is a game I took a complete punt on. I didn't know anything about it really, but I had a bit of spare money. I thought I'd pick this one up from KIENDA. So this one is a kind of a grid building style game, as you have these little cards that are sectioned off, and you are going to be overlapping these cards to build a little landscape. So think of games like, you know, Circle the Wagons, games like, you know, Metropolis or Sprawlopolis. You know, these games that overlap cards. So there's lots of games like this out there. This one, you are choosing one card to play out of a 2-card hand into your personal tableau, but you'll give the remaining one to your opponent to play, and you'll repeat that basically 4 times until you have 8 cards played. Now, these cards are double-sided, and on one side of these cards you have a goal, like a scoring criteria, and the other side you don't, but it'll give you maybe a few more features that will synergize with those goals. And it's all about trying to, of course, exploit those goals as much as possible to squeeze every point out of them. But I must admit, out of all these games that I've played, because this is quite similar to a lot of other games that I've mentioned already, I think that this might have some of the most interesting scoring categories that I've seen. So for example, some might say for every, I think they're wolves, every wolf you have that's more than 5 spaces away from a village, you'll score X amount of points. Or for every river you have going into a mountain, you'll score X amount of points, and so on. But the additional twist on this game is that for each scoring category that you put down in your tableau, you will actually score -10 points for. So that you want to be, that means that you want to be squeezing at least 10 points out of these scoring categories so that you're actually venturing into positive points. And I must admit that has bitten me pretty hard in the past, because you go into this game thinking, I'll just put as many goals down as I can, but that is not often a good thing, because it's quite difficult to get, you know, maximum potency out of each of those scoring categories. Really nice flow to this one. Some good puzzly aspects to it, as you know, overlapping things. You know, what do I do? Do I need to cover this up? Do I need to hide this? I want to keep these together, and so on. But for a 10-minute game, there's only 2 players, good back and forth, real good brain-racking decisions, good spatial awareness and things going on. This is a really good example of its genre, and it's up there with the best of them. I'd probably rather play this than a game like Metropolis or Sprawlopolis, games like that, because this one is, number one, it's competitive, and I do like that decision of what do I want to give my opponent, because I don't exactly want to help them. And because it's only 2 players, you've got a bit more autonomy in that respect, because you can actually just glance over at your opponent's tableau and see what they might do with the card that you've just given them. So you're not going to get much of a better game for 10 minutes, to be honest. Very small, concise box, and it's not going to take up much shelf on your space. And yeah, it's really impressed me actually, and it's probably going to be a contender for Surprise of the Year. So that is Confusing Lands at number 3. At number 2, I have Youre Bluffing. So a classic bluffing card game from many, many years ago. I've been on my watch list for a long time now. I managed to pick up a copy for very cheap, thanks to a fan of the show actually, so I appreciate you very much. This one is a game. When I read the rules, I was a little bit apprehensive about it, because I thought this might be a little bit too wacky for my game group. I'm not sure how it's going to land. It could go one way or the other, but it turns out it went down really well. So This one, it's an auction style game where you're going to be revealing these animal cards, and these animal cards vary massively in terms of the points they'll score. So you've got these like little chickens that are only worth, say, 10 points per set of 4 that you've got, but you've got these horses that are worth like 1,000 points for each set of 4 that you have. So you know you can see the disparity in the points there. But what I do love about this game is this bluffing mechanism, where if you and an opponent have the same type of animal in your scoring tableau, then you can actually try to get, or try to almost bribe your opponent to give you that card by playing these money cards face down in front of them. Now they actually have no choice but to either accept your offer or to offer a counter offer for your animal of the same type. And if they accept your offer, then all is good. You just take the money, and of course you'll get the animal in return, but you don't know what that money is. So it could be loads, it could be these 0 bluffing cards that are worth nothing, and so on. But if you make a counter offer, it's quite interesting because you both look at those money cards individually, and whoever has bid the most will get those cards, but you'll swap the amount of money. So there's layers to the bluffing here where you might think, is he trying to rip me off? Or if he is trying to rip me off, I'll just make a counter offer, give him a little bit of money, and I'll probably win his card off him. But of course he knows that, and so on. So there's that real double think going into the gameplay here. Real dynamic state as cards are constantly swapping and changing between the players. And I love the way that this game does not offer you any change when it comes to money, because a lot like the cards you're collecting, the animal cards, the money comes in very strict denominations as well, ranging from 10 up to 50, up to 100, up to 200, up to 500, and you can never get change from those cards. So sometimes you are forced to overspend because you simply do not have the smaller card denominations. I like the closed economy in this game, as you know exactly what is in play. You have the potential to hoard money if you want to, and it's just a very enjoyable experience, to be honest. Now, my only nitpick is that it can go a little bit long. Not too long to the point where I was bored, but it felt like I'd played this game out by the time it was ended and I was ready to move on to something else. Again, not to the point where I didn't enjoy it, but it was something I was slightly aware of. But if you play with at least a sense of urgency, I don't think it's going to outstay its welcome. But if players are somewhat dragging their heels and you are playing at the higher player counts, then that you could potentially fall into that trap. So be careful of that. But all in all, a game that's aged very well, quirky art style. It's just a lot of fun and one of the best bluffing games that I've played. So that is Youre Bluffing at number 2. And finally, at number 1, and the only game to get a commendation this episode, is Foundations of Metropolis. So this is a re-implementation of Foundations of Rome, which is a game that I sadly could not get a copy of, or I wasn't willing to spend that much money and have such a large box in my collection. Despite me loving the ancient Rome theme, and I think I'd like to have that version more than this one, but I was still grateful that they did re-release the game in a much more sensible box size and a much more sensible price point. Now, this is a game that I was concerned that might be a little bit too light and not have enough going on to keep me interested, but I wanted to give it a go because I like the idea of the game, and I tend to like games that are based on kind of building up a city, buying plots of land and building things on those plots of land. And that's what this game is all about. But again, after reading the rule book, only kind of having a few pages of rules and only 3 choices you can make, I thought, is there really enough game here for someone who's played as many games as I have? And I'm so glad to say that, yes, this is a tremendous design that definitely over-impressed me in what I thought this game was going to deliver on. So this is a very simple, I suppose you can call it an economic game with a communal board. So you have this kind of big cityscape. On your turn, you can do one of 3 things. So you can either buy a plot of land based on a grid reference that's on this kind of sliding row of cards. The more neglected cards will become cheaper as the game goes on. If you buy a plot of land, you simply take that card and place a plot marker on that particular grid reference to show that you own that particular space. Another thing you can do is you can take money. So you can take 5 coins, plus coins based on these commercial buildings that you might have built on the board. And of course, your third action is to actually build the buildings in the first place. Now, what I like about this game is how simple these buildings are, because some of them just simply give you a few extra coins when it comes to harvesting money. Some of them will give you population, which will give you kind of majority bonuses at the end of the round. And some of them are these civic buildings, which means that they'll score points based on things that they are touching on the player board. So, for example, you've got these buildings that say, this will give you a point for every single population that's touching this particular tile. So as you can imagine, as the board starts to build up, you might find that particular spot that you might sneak that piece in to get a lot of points that way. But I think that game, at this point, the game alone would have been really solid. But what I love about this game is the ability to upgrade your buildings as more and more land is being developed onto the player board, or more buildings are being erected. So basically, if you ever have a plot of land and you have a tile that can fit onto that plot of land, as long as the new tile that you're placing is bigger than the existing ones, you can actually choose to replace those existing buildings with a new one, which will of course increase your yield of population or money, or points in different ways. But that also means that those things go back onto your player board that you can deploy again later. So my biggest concern with this game was that because of how drip-fed the different plots of land were given to the players, I thought, well, the potential to get these big buildings down is going to be quite difficult, because we're just going to be blocking each other, and it's already going to be populated with the smaller buildings. But again, the idea that you can build on top of your existing buildings completely throws those concerns out the window, and actually adds a whole new dimension into the decision space and what you're doing here, because sometimes you actually might replace population with more retail buildings, meaning that your population will fall at the wrong time because a scoring round might be coming up, and so on. So very stripped back game. It kind of feels like a hybrid of, I don't know, games like Chinatown, a bit of, I don't know, like city building style games, a bit of an economic edge to it, but all so refined and streamlined to the point where you're just making one of three very simple decisions. So this one straddles that line perfectly of being accessible but clever, again streamlined, fast, engaging, dynamic, and all these things are the stuff that I love. This is a game that's going to hit the table very regularly for me. I just know it hits that perfect sweet spot of the games that I enjoy and my gaming group enjoy, and I can't really sing its praises enough. And I was expecting to like it, but I was not expecting to like it this much. And I wouldn't, if I was you, and much like myself, I wouldn't be overly concerned about how light this game is, because again, the decisions are there, and it's interesting enough to keep even more seasoned gamers engaged. So that is Foundations of Metropolis at number 1. So there we have it, that concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it and discovered a game or two to explore. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. Also be sure to check out the BGG page for my new game, Thalamus. That will be available for purchase soon. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.